So what is on the General Secretary of CPC Central Committee Xi Jinping's agenda, and what does it say in the report? Let's turn to our panelists. We have a very strong panel today with us here in Beijing. Mr. Yuan Peng, Vice President of the China Institute of Contemporary International Relations, one of the experts when it comes to China's international relations. Sir, it's a great welcome to you. Joining us in Washington, D.C., we have Dr. Cheng Li, Director and Senior Fellow at the Thornton China Center at the Brookings institution. He's the first Chinese national ever that has served in that position. Welcome as well. In Berlin, we are honored to have Dr. Wolfram Adolphi from the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation. He's a sinologist and also has researched Chinese politics and CPC, the Chinese Communist Party, for about 40 years. What a pleasure to have you as well, sir. Let me begin by asking you, Mr. Yuan, here in Beijing, what exactly does it say when Xi Jinping, the General Secretary of the CPC, suggesting China is coming into a new stage of socialist with Chinese characteristics?
Yeah, the so-called new stage or new era, maybe it's the most impressive saying by President Xi, given in the 19th Party's Congress speech. I think my understanding that socialism with Chinese characteristics, according to Deng Xiaoping's theory and philosophy, is a very, very long period to be accomplished. Maybe generations. So nobody knows when was the end day of the so-called socialism with Chinese characteristics. But in this long period, we have different stages. For example, Chairman Mao's era, making Chinese standing up.
Right.
And Deng Xiaoping's era, making Chinese getting rich. Now, according to, given the past 5 years hard work and good strategy, now we are entering the new era. That's Xi Jinping's new era means China now from becoming rich to becoming strong. Now it's turning from becoming strong to achieve the final goal, that is a national rejuvenation. So this is the new phase and the new stage or new era. So all the strategy should fit this new reality and to do some adjustment.
Dr. Li, from afar, you've been observing very closely, though, of the opening ceremony. What exactly is coming to your mind when these words are being used?
Well, I think that Yuan Peng is right, that China, despite the fact it is still a developing country, but no longer a backward country. China's middle class is emerging. China and the Chinese foreign and domestic policy affect the world in a significant way. China moved to the center stage of global influence, as Xi Jinping rightly emphasized. So I think the next stage, the new era, is really to deal with the unbalanced, inadequate development, which is, I think it's very appropriate. This unbalanced or inadequate could refer to different things between different economic regions in China, different geographical regions, different economic social groups, and it could be difference between politics and the economy, between domestic development and international influence, and etc. So that's a right approach, rightly emphasize the new challenge and the new opportunity that China confront after China's emerge as second largest economy in the world.
Right. It's exactly the quote that General Secretary Xi Jinping has been talking about, the inadequate and unbalanced development China is having that needs to be changed to meet the increasing need of the people to have better lives. And Dr. Adolphi, right after he said this, he specifically mentioned a few areas, which is quite interesting. He talked about democracy, rule of law, fairness, equality, justice, security, and the better environment. How would these words, in a way, explain what Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party have in mind in looking for new alternatives of development in the future? Dr. Adolphi.
I'm very impressed by the courageous visions to look into the year 2049. I don't know any other country or any other party who is so courageous to make such a long-lasting social planning. And you gave us the words which are specific for this development, and of course it shows that there is a very complex approach to social development, that there is an approach to the economic as well as the social as well as the ecological development. And of course, and I am convinced since a long time, that this long-lasting, courageous planning will influence the whole world because of its continuity and of its strength, which is behind it. And there is included a vision of a new democratic approach to this social development. It is encouraging for people in other countries too.
I see. Well, certainly there are a lot of words being used, and you could say continuity is one of the most important characteristics of Chinese Communist Party when it comes to its governance here in China. But Dr. Li, in the report, he specifically used so many times a phrase called national rejuvenation. To many from outside China, what exactly does that mean? In the United States, you have right now America first. And does national rejuvenation from a Chinese perspective, does it mean China first?
No, I think this is related with the Chinese culture tradition. As we know that the Chinese culture may not be the longest civilization in the world, but it's the longest in terms of continuing civilization in the world. And the China's rise actually precisely should call the China's re-emergence or re-rise to the center stage of the world affairs. China was a great power, was a great country for many centuries, and etc. So I think that rejuvenation of Chinese culture reflects the confidence of Chinese culture and reflect the need that China wants to return to its glorious past. And this is not in terms of hostile. Now, Xi Jinping made it very clear that China never become a hegemony. China wants to contribute to peace and prosperity of the world. And of course, that the many countries in the world welcome China's rise, and some of the countries may still have a concern. I think Xi Jinping's report really addressed this concern and talk about China's culture rejuvenation will not be expense of the other country, but the return to the harmonious and kind of vision that the Chinese, Confucius ideas. So that's the emphasis, not so much in terms of horsepower, aggressive and assertive.
I see. But Mr. Yuan, we wish others would take China by words, as China usually follow its words. But on the other hand, how could you explain to the rest of the world that when one country is looking for national rejuvenation, what is going to be the role of the established power already existing in our world today? Mr. Yuan.
Yes, you have given a very good comparison that American first and Chinese national rejuvenation. Actually, it's not the same concept. American first means that put Americans' interest, Americans' demands in the first place, first position, and it's a little bit of selfish, strategy. And when talking about Chinese national rejuvenation, I think according to Xi's definition, that is Chinese dream. This is a dream of Chinese as a country, as a nation, and also as a dream for 1.3 Chinese people to demand a better life. It's a very modest, dream. And historically speaking, China was in the very top position in the world and enjoys a prosperous and civilization world. And after the Opium War, we are victims of Western imperialism. Now, after Chairman Mao making China standing up, after Deng Xiaoping making China rich, now we are getting more and more strong. And from strong to national rejuvenation, to put China in the right place in the world. But this is totally different from the American first. For example, American first, because of that, Donald Trump quit, its position in the TPP and the Paris Climate Accord, and China still playing a leading role in that regard. Even if China is still a developing country, we have lots of actual needs. So I think Chinese national rejuvenance in a modest ways that has a better life for 1.3 population.
I see. Dr. Li, on the other hand, the Chinese General Secretary of the CPC, Xi Jinping, has been talking about something called community of shared future for mankind. That is an idea China wants to promote to the rest of the world about what China wants to achieve together with everybody else in the world. But you know, when you push an idea, when you encourage an idea to spread around, what does it take? Does it take the hard power, or does it take the soft power? In other words, is it the economy that's going to speak, or is it from the hearts and minds that you're going to win eventually?
I think it's both hard power and soft power play an important role, but ultimately it's the soft power. It's the ideas for peace, for prosperity of the global community, precisely Xi Jinping emphasized, that will win the hearts and minds. But of course, at the moment, there's some cynicism. A lot of countries, especially people in Europe and the United States, may have difficulty to understand China. But again, China is part of the solution of the global challenges, like not only just a global economic stability, and China's middle class consumption will contribute to global economic development, but also China play an important role in security, whether it be nuclear non-proliferation or anti-terrorism. I think eventually also the cybersecurity requires major powers' participation, because only major power can take the burden to deal with these common challenges. And also China is already moving to the frontier in terms of UN peacekeeping and also environment protection. Again, as time goes on, as China plays more and more important role as part of the solution, not part of the problem, I think the world will have different views of China. So ultimately, is what the soft power, what you represent, and will make a difference. But of course, money helps.
Let's go to Dr. Adolphi in Germany. What is going to speak with the strongest voice? Is it soft or the hard power? In the speech of Xi Jinping, General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, which comes to you? Is it the hard power or is it the soft power? Dr. Adolphi.
I hope that it will be the soft power. And since a long time I stand for an idea which says that China, of course, has to take the place in the world which it deserves since more than 100 years. And we see a long way since the beginning of the 20th century that China came back to its place in the world and its role in the world. And of course, my hope and the hope of a lot of other people here in my country is that China will really prefer the soft way. And that means if the national rejuvenation is combined with a rejuvenation of the United Nations, and if it is combined with a rejuvenation of the peaceful means of the solving of international problems, and the strengthening of the ecological cooperation and of the world trade cooperation, then it will be a way which will be highly appreciated by other people too. And in a world where we have such a lot of conflicts, and where we have such a lot of old and new tensions in Europe, there is a lot of new tensions, and there are nationalist ideas and nationalist visions too, which overcome elder planning of a combined and of a united Europe. It is very, very important that there will be a strengthening of the soft way of the regeneration of China in the world.
But you know, Mr. Yuan, in the speech, two parts, quite firm and strong in wording. One is about building a very strong Chinese army in the near future. Secondly, it's about what to do with the Taiwan issue. So if what Dr. Adolphi was saying is better than soft power, is China really demonstrating the soft powers through the speech, or demonstrating its very hard power and ambition? Mr. Yuan.
Actually, according to my understanding, the core meaning of the so-called community of the shared future of mankind is that we should go beyond the difference of different ideology, different value, social system, and the clash of civilization. So pursue a win-win cooperation. So the base of this thinking is the win-win cooperation. The condition for pursue the win-win cooperation is because of that now we're in the new era of globalization and information of a new technology. What is the new condition to achieve a win-win cooperation? Because of win-win cooperation, then we can move to the shared future of all mankind. But this not necessarily means that without any hard power as the base. For example, Chinese military modernization is the base to defend Chinese own territorial and sovereignty. For example, Taiwan issue, I think President Xi gave a very strong rhetoric that Taiwan reunification is one part of a Chinese national rejuvenation. This is our bottom line, cannot give up.
Dr. Li, your thought?
Well, certainly we, people from the United States are paying attention for China's rapid military modernization. And we certainly hope that this will be only for China's national defense. And certainly that the United States and China could not afford military confrontation between these two great powers. So we wanted to work with China through mill-to-mill dialogue and cooperation. And of course, that we also noticed that it's a long-term goal for China's military modernization. Xi Jinping mentioned that by 2049, China will establish a world-class army. I hope that by that time, that the United States and China will find an even better way to cooperate with each other. Just like Secretary Tillerson mentioned, we should maintain 50 years friendship and beyond.
We hope that will be the case. Probably it will have to be starting just a few weeks from now when President Trump is visiting China later this year. We talk about China and China's new era of development. In the past 5 years, China's GDP, in fact, has been increased from $8.2 trillion to $12.1 trillion. China also accounts for 30% of the global economic growth. But that is only one number. In fact, many are also seeing that China is still at the preliminary stage of socialism with Chinese characteristics. That has been reaffirmed by Xi Jinping once again during today's report. So, Mr. Yuan, I have a big question for you. That is, all right, China is still at the preliminary stage of socialism with Chinese characteristics. How could China be able to shoulder so much responsibilities internationally through Belt and Road Initiative? And also domestically, when you look at different kinds of agenda also being mentioned in the report, how should we reconcile this?
First of all, I think today we don't think GDP as the most important figure to think about the national comprehensive power. For example, China today, we won't put GDP growth as the index to think the future of China. So put a friendly environmental society as a very important position. And a better life of average people is more important than the numbers of GDP. On the other hand, even if China is still a developed country, but as the biggest developed country and the second largest economy, we have our own world responsibility. For example, One Belt and One Road initiative, that is want to Chinese rights benefit to all, not only Chinese rights by ourselves, but also want Chinese rights benefit to our neighboring countries, to those developed countries who need us.
Right.
And we win-win cooperation. Through that, we benefit from their rights. So we want a rights of all rather than rights by ourselves.
I see. Dr. Adolphi, you see quite a personality of the Chinese Communist Party these days, demonstrated even through the opening meeting of the CPC 19th Party Congress, and also the personality of Xi Jinping as the core of the leadership for this generation of CPC. I know you've been doing a lot of research about that, about his history and his vision. Dr. Adolphi, what is your judgment of this person and the likely role he's going to play for this generation of CPC and also leading up to the vision of the future? Dr. Adolphi.
You know, as a socialist myself, I'm of course very much interested in the concept of socialism with Chinese characteristics. And I look into the history of the Communist Party, and I see that it is a party which has learned from the communist movement in the world, also in the way of planning its own development, the development of the Communist Party. And I was very happy that I saw Xi Jinping together with other leading persons from the past in the front row of the Party Congress, because if I look back in the development of the Soviet Union or of the German Democratic Republic, I see that they never managed such ways of the changing and the continuous changing and rejuvenation of the leadership of the Communist Party. So I'm very much impressed of it, and I am impressed of how the Communist Party stands to the aim to combine Marxist thinking with Mao's and Deng Xiaoping's thinking. And I read with great interest how Xi Jinping tried to combine that together for a new concept of socialism. Nobody in the world can say whether it will be successful, but for the general development of socialism in the centuries, it is a very, very interesting approach.
It is interesting for observers like you. Also for you, Dr. Li, one of the things is that it's not just party leadership, it is also the state leadership here in China, because the CPC has been the ruling party of China for decades. So what do you think about that style of the personality and the responsibility that put on their shoulder this generation, Dr. Li?
Well, this is a generation combined with idealism and practicism. It's a unique generation grew up in the Cultural Revolution. I think that we should have a balanced view of this very capable and interesting generation. Now, the key word from Xi Jinping's speech is balance. I think that from outside the world, we should also look at China in a balanced way. And China is a second largest economy, but it's also a developing country. Yes, Chinese leaders are very pragmatic, but also they're determined to make China to do better. Yes, there's some tensions between political system and economic development, but I think that China wanted to emphasize that all kinds of development, and of course that's its priority. I hope that Xi Jinping's second term will address some of the things that need to be improved. I think that he certainly surprised us for the achievements of first 5-year term. I hope that his second term will also full of promises based on the speech.
Of course, deepening the reform and also opening up, those have been words also mentioned in the report delivered by the General Secretary Xi Jinping of the Chinese Communist Party. For now, I want to thank the three of you for your insights and certainly your expertise and observation for this very important day here in China. Dr. Cheng Li, Mr. Yuan Peng, and Dr. Wolfram Adolphi. Really appreciate, gentlemen, for being with us. I hope to have you back once again for the future discussion. Thank you.